All right, here we go. Good morning. We are here with another episode of science class. This week we're learning about the biosphere, and yesterday we discussed that the biosphere is made up of all the living things on Earth. So we spent some time in yesterday's lesson talking about what makes a living thing, right? What is the difference between living and non-living things? And we learned that plants and animals are living things, as well as bacteria and fungi. So plants, animals, fungi, bacteria, those are the components of the biosphere. And they all have these 7 things in common. This is what we learned yesterday. MRSGREN, Mrs. Gren. That's how we remember these 7 traits. So all living things move, respirate, which means breathe. All living things respond to their environment, so they're sensitive. All living things grow, reproduce, excrete waste or eliminate waste. And all living things need nutrients, or they need food and energy, right? So for the rest of this week, we're going to start breaking down the life cycles of different living things. Today, plants, tomorrow, insects, and the next day, animals, other animals besides insects. So plants, invertebrates, and then vertebrates. And we're going to go through all the different changes that they go through in their life. Okay, so today's objective is I can describe the life cycles of plants. Let's talk about how plants change as they grow. So first things first, what is a plant? Plants are, you probably already know what a plant is, right? But it's a very broad definition because there's millions of different types of plants. So what makes all plants count as a plant? Well, they have to be made of plant cells. So there are 2 different kinds of cells, right? All living things have cells. That's one thing that makes a living thing, is its atoms and molecules are arranged in cells, these little tiny, tiny building blocks that make up living things. But animal cells, as you can see on this side, look a lot different from plant cells. So plants have their own type of cell. All plants are made of plant cells. As you can see, they have slightly boxier shape. So whereas animal cells are this round, kind of circular, squishy shape, plant cells have walls and slightly different organs. There's a lot of similarities between them. And 4th graders, you know, because we broke down all of the different organelles inside of the cell. But basically, the main difference is that plant cells have a cell wall and a much larger vacuole. So here's a good picture of a plant cell with its thick walls on the outside and this big vacuole. So that's for holding waste and extra water. Right? So these walls and the big vacuole inside of the cells are important because that's what helps keep the cells upright and nice and juicy and full. Okay, so all plants have plant cells. There are also living things that produce their own energy. So you guys might remember that we call plants producers. Animals are consumers and plants are producers. That's because plants can produce their own energy through photosynthesis. And then also plants usually have roots, stems, and leaves, and sometimes petals. Okay, so these are things that all plants have in common. If they're made of plant cells, if they make their own energy through photosynthesis, if they have roots and stems and leaves, then they're a plant. And plants can look different. Sometimes, not all roots and stems and leaves look the same, and sometimes plants don't have roots or stems or leaves. But all plants have plant cells and make their own energy. Okay, so pause your video. Here's question number 1 on your Google form, which is, what do all plants have in common? Okay. Hopefully you're actually pressing pause when I say pause the video so that you can go to your Google form and fill out the answer to question number 1. Then when you're ready, you come back to the video and press play. And you could have written that all plants have in common plant cells, or they do photosynthesis, or they're plant parts, right? Roots, stems, leaves, petals. Okay, and even though we're going to talk about plant life cycles today, it's important to remember that not all plants have the same life cycle. So we have 2 different types of plants, flowering plants and non-flowering plants. So here are some flowering plants. That's most plants that you can think of grow flowers that's in order to reproduce. Right? Even trees grow flowers. All the fruits and vegetables that you know grow flowers, right? Obviously, flowers grow flowers. And then you also have non-flowering plants. So plants that don't produce flowers ever in their life, things like mosses and ferns, and also pine trees, right? Conifer trees. So some trees, instead of producing flowers, produce cones, right? Which are still a type of seed, but they just don't produce flowers. So today we're going to talk mostly about flowering plants. We're going to focus on flowering plant life cycles and talk about how plants grow from a seed and mature all the way into a beautiful flowering plant and then grow new seeds again to continue their life cycle. Okay, so flowering plant life cycles start with a seed. You guys might remember the dance that we did together in class when we first learned this all the way back in August. This was one of the first things we learned at the beginning of the year. So maybe you remember all of the dance steps to these 6 different stages, right? Flowering plants start as a seed, and then they germinate. Then they grow roots and a stem. Then leaves, 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 leaves and more leaves. Finally, flowers. And last but not least, pollination. And pollination allows that flower to make new seeds and start the life cycle all over again. So seed, germination, roots and a stem, leaves, flowers, pollination. Those are our 6 stages. Okay, so step 1 is a seed. Flowering plants start as a seed. So seeds come in many different shapes and sizes and colors and designs, but all seeds are born inside of fruits and flowers. So here's a quick image of all these different types of seeds, and there's millions more. This is just a small sample, but as you can see, there are some seeds that are huge, like pits inside of peaches and cherries and avocados. Those are giant seeds compared to poppy seeds or sesame seeds, which are teeny, teeny, tiny. And then there are seeds that we eat, like pumpkin seeds and sunflower seeds. You've probably had some of those yourself. Even beans count as a seed, right? And coconuts, huge, gigantic coconuts, also are seeds. So seeds can come in all these different shapes and sizes. The next step is that the seed has to germinate. And what does germinate mean? So step 2 is germination. Germinate means to sprout or to grow, right? To activate. So it's not the process of growing as much as it's the beginning of growth, right? The start of growth. So when something or when a seed finally wakes up and begins to sprout, that's what we call germination. And sometimes this can take months, weeks, years, even sometimes hundreds or thousands of years. Seeds can wait and stay what we call dormant, right? Stay asleep until they're finally ready and they have the right conditions to be able to start growing. So germination doesn't always happen right away when you put the seed into the ground, right? Seeds need good conditions in order to germinate. So what are seeds looking for? Seeds are looking for 3 things to be able to germinate. I wonder if you remember them. First one, water, then oxygen, and finally, warmth. Water, oxygen, warmth. W-O-W. Wow. Wow. So seeds need that wow factor in order to germinate. Okay, so here's some images for you. Some water. Oxygen, the best way for me to picture oxygen is I think of the air, right? Sky. Although a lot of times seeds are getting their oxygen from the soil. That's why I've also included a picture of the soil. And then the sun for warmth. So they need water, oxygen, and warmth. And I also included this picture of the clock because germination takes time, right? All of this takes time. So it really depends on what kind of seed you have. But once the conditions are right, that seed will germinate. So it just depends. Sometimes seeds are waiting years for the conditions to be right. Okay, so they're looking for W-O-W, that wow factor, water, oxygen, warmth. Okay, so go ahead and pause your video. Let's answer question number 2 on the Google form. If you're not sure where to find the Google form, you can look in your agenda, or you can look underneath the video down in the description. I also will link it in the description. So question number 2, what does a seed need to germinate? To wake up and begin sprouting, begin growing. Okay, and you should have said water, oxygen, and warmth. There you go. So first we have a seed, then it has to germinate. Then third stage, now it's going to grow roots and a stem. So this sort of happens simultaneously, right? Roots and a stem are popping out of the seed almost at the same time. Let me show you. So step 3, roots and a stem. First question, what are roots and what is a stem? Let's make sure we're on the same page. I'll show you some pictures. So these are roots. I'm sure you've seen them before. There are the spindly little fingers, usually at the bottom of a plant. And these roots form a network in the soil. Sometimes they can be in air or in water, but usually roots will be digging down into the soil. Okay, and they're like little tiny straws or little tiny roads, you might think of them as little tiny passageways, right, for water and nutrients to be sucked up into the plant. So you can see I've included pictures of tree roots, but also pictures of some root vegetables. So carrots, beets, turnips. These are actually roots also. These vegetables are the actual roots of the plants that are getting nice and thick and juicy and full of nutrients. And then we pull them up and we eat them. Okay, so these are roots. And then here's some stems. So the stem is the long, straight part of the plant. And that can be anything from a tree trunk to a bamboo stalk to the stems of flowers, right? But they're long, straight tubes. And usually they're hollow, like tubes, or somewhat hollow. They have spaces on the inside of them so that, just like the roots, they can be passageways or highways for water and nutrients to get all the way through the whole plant. Okay, so here's an image of how the roots and the stem are kind of popping out of the seed at the same time. Okay, so here's a really good picture of a seed that has just barely germinated. And as you can see, you see this long little, kind of looks like a finger popping out. That's called the taproot, right? This is the first root that's popping out of the seed. And that's going to dig straight into the ground. And as it comes out, see in this image over here, as it's coming out of the seed, it's digging down into the ground. And then the rest of the root that's following the taproot is going to sort of flip upright and turn into the stem. Right? Can you see how this part of the seed pops out of the soil, okay, and opens up into these first two little leaves. And what was bent and crooked right here is now straight and tall. Okay, so this is the stem. This is how the stem starts out, as basically an extension of the root. Right? And different plants grow in different ways, but this is, I'm just teaching you a general structure for the way a lot of different plants grow. So you can see here's the root and stem popping out of these seeds, and the tiny, tiny, tiny little stems on these little sprouts. Okay, and remember, most plants are starting out really, really small and really fragile. So this is the time in their life when they're just babies, and just like a human baby, right? They need care and protection. Okay, it's easy for them to get hurt, and it's easy to kill little tiny sprouts. They're pretty finicky. So again, plants are different, so some plants need more tender care than others. But a tiny little sprout like this would need a warm and safe place to grow up. Okay, this is a delicate time in their life. All right, so what are the roots and stems for? They're to soak up water and nutrients from the soil, support the plant as it grows, and then to provide nutrients and water to the whole plant. So like I said, they're kind of the highway or the road system where all the things that the plant needs are traveling from the soil and up through the whole plant. Okay, so we start as a seed, then the seed germinates, then it grows roots and a stem. Next step are the leaves. So step 4, a plant grows leaves. And the plant's going to spend a big portion of its young life just growing leaves. Okay, we call this the vegetation state, or veg state, veg mode. Right? So leaves come in all different shapes and sizes, but the important part is that they are mostly green and mostly flat. Right? So there's a reason for that, and we'll get into that in just a second. So let's look at what is a leaf. Here are some pictures of leaves. I know you have seen leaves before, but here are some pictures of the different sizes, shapes, and colors. You'll see that most of them are green, and most leaves will be green throughout their life. And then some leaves come in different shades, reddish and yellowish. And a lot of leaves will turn yellow or red as they start to die, and as the trees go dormant in the wintertime. Okay, so you can see all their different shapes, but for the most part, they're green and flattish. And the reason for that is because leaves have an important job to do. A leaf is responsible for making food for the plant. And you already know, I hope you know, I'm going to test your knowledge. That process is called what? Pause your video and let's go answer question number 3. See if you can remember what is it called when leaves make food for the plant. Okay, so fill in the blank in your Google form. Leaves make food for the plant through a process called Through a process called photosynthesis. Photosynthesis. Fantastic. So why is a leaf green? Why is a leaf green and why is a leaf usually flat? In order to do photosynthesis, a plant has to have chlorophyll inside of it. And you guys might remember when we learned about plant cells, that plant cells have chloroplasts and chlorophyll inside of them. And chlorophyll is what turns leaves green, right? It's a greenish colored pigment. So leaves are usually green because they have to have chlorophyll inside of them so that they can soak up sunlight and do the job of photosynthesis. Leaves are really important for a plant. So the leaf stage or the veg stage is kind of like the teenage, like adolescence stage of the plant, right? A plant will spend a long time, sometimes months, sometimes years, depends on the plant, but just growing leaves and more and more and more leaves and growing bigger and taller and bushier and growing more leaves. And the reason for that is because the leaves are what are producing energy for the plant, right? The plant can't grow unless it has enough food, and the plant can't make food unless it has enough leaves, or specifically enough chlorophyll, to do the job of photosynthesis. So leaves are really good at that job, just like a teenager is good at two things, growing and eating, right? Eating food. So that's what a plant is doing when it is in its leaf stage and growing a bunch of leaves, right? And sometimes it goes on and on and on for years until a plant is finally ready to mature into adulthood. And we know a plant is ready for adulthood when it shows us the next stage of the life cycle, which is flowers. So we have a seed germinates, it grows roots and a stem, then leaves, and leaves, 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 then finally the beautiful flowers. Aww. So you're noticing that one of the themes of our lesson today is variety, right? Seeds come in all different shapes and sizes. Leaves come in all different shapes and sizes. Same with flowers, right? So look at all this variety of color and beauty. So lovely. Maybe someday I will have a flower shop. I think flowers are so wonderful. So, something that all flowers have in common. How can you tell a flower is a flower? Because they have petals, they usually have bright colors, and beautiful smells, right? Flowers are known for their beauty and for their really lovely scents. So pause your video and answer for me question number 4 on your Google form. Flowers have brightly colored petals and sweet scents in order to attract what? Why are flowers like this? Why are flowers so bright and colorful and pretty and delicious? Okay, and the reason is because flowers attract pollinators. You maybe said they're trying to attract bees or butterflies or birds. Those are all correct answers as well. Okay, and again, another theme in our lesson today is not only is there lots of variety in each of these stages, but also at every stage, each plant part has an important job to do, right? So the seed has a job, the roots and stem have their job, the leaves have a job, and the flowers also have an important job to do. So their job is to attract pollinators. So we'll talk about pollinators in just a second. But the reason we need pollinators is because flowers, well, let me back up. All flowers need to attract pollinators. And then some flowers have a different job as well besides attracting pollinators. So we have male flowers and you have female flowers. Male flowers and female flowers have slightly different jobs. Both of them need to attract pollinators, but male flowers are going to attract pollinators and make the pollen, where female flowers are going to attract pollinators and grow the seeds or grow the fruit. Grow the seeds and then grow the fruit in order to protect the seeds. Right? So when you see seeds or fruit, that's coming from typically from a female flower or a female plant. Did you know that there are male and female plants? There's also something called a perfect flower, just a perfect little flower. And perfect flowers have both male and female capabilities. So they can make pollen and grow seeds and grow fruit all at once. Now, that's a pretty lucky flower. Right? So all flowers have an important job to do. They're there to attract the pollinators, to make the pollen, to grow the seeds, and to grow the fruit. Okay, now we're on to the very last stage of the life cycle. So we just learned that flowers, when you see flowers on a plant, that means it's a mature adult plant. It is ready to reproduce, ready to make more babies, basically, make more flowers or more plants. So the flower is going to make seeds, which is going to start the life cycle all over again. But how do we get from flowers to seeds? Right? There's one more stage of the life cycle that links those two up. It completes the cycle because this next stage is what allows flowers to make seeds. So last but not least, the pollinators do their deed. So pollination is step 6. And here is what it looks like. So pollination is when an insect or a bird or sometimes a mammal like a human or a bat visits a flower and transports pollen. Do you see all this little pollen? All this yellow dust looking stuff? A pollinator transports pollen from one flower to another. So bees are especially good at this. And other types of insects too. Butterflies, ladybugs are really good pollinators because they are constantly visiting flowers, right? They go and drink the nectar out of these flowers, and then they get pollen, kind of by accident, stuck all over their little hairs on their body. Okay, and then they fly to another flower and fly to another flower and fly to another flower, and they might not even realize the important work that they're doing for these flowers, but as they go around sipping nectar from flower to flower, they're transporting pollen from the male flowers to the female flowers. So pollination helps complete the life cycle because it allows flowers to make new seeds. Okay, pollinators have to do this. They have to move pollen from male to female flowers. So pollinators include any animal who visits flowers and gets close enough to get pollen on them. Okay, so we could look at bees as the most common pollinator, but there are so many others too. Right? Ladybugs, different types of birds like hummingbirds drink nectar from flowers, even bats, and other types of beetles, flies. Even mosquitoes can be pollinators. Right, so any animal that gets all up in a flower, and humans can do this too. Usually we do it on purpose using little Q-tips. But anybody who moves pollen from one flower to another counts as a pollinator. Okay, so pause the video. Let's answer question number 5 on your Google form. Tell me 3 different types of pollinators. Okie dokie. So there we go. That about wraps up our life cycle. Oh, last thing is that pollination not only is allowing flowers to make new seeds, but it's also helping plants grow fruits. So plants grow fruits in order to protect the seeds, and seeds don't happen unless the plant gets pollinated. So next time you want to bite into a juicy apple, or eat some delicious strawberries, or you chop up a cucumber to put into your salad, anytime you're eating something that has seeds inside, thank a pollinator. Because pollinators and pollination is the only reason that we have fruits and flowers and, truth be told, life on Earth. Thanks, pollinators. Okay, pause your video and answer this question for me. Plants grow fruit in order to protect what? Why do plants grow fruit? Okay, and the answer is seeds. Plants grow fruit to protect their seeds. It's like a big juicy cushion surrounding the seeds. So really any food that you eat that has seeds inside counts as a fruit, not a vegetable. If it has seeds, it's a fruit. Okay, finally, let's review really quickly the whole entire life cycle. So a flowering plant starts as a seed, then it has to germinate. Now it grows roots in a stem. Next come the leaves, finally the flowers, and last but not least, the pollinators do their deed. And that allows the whole life cycle to start back over. Keeps on going, keeps on going, and keeps on going. Okay? So seeds. Alrighty. And remember, we are only focusing today on flowering plants. There are other life cycles that plants go through that don't involve using flowers and therefore don't require pollinators. So that is a topic for another day. But on DOL today, I am only going to be testing you on those 6 stages of a flowering plant's life cycle. Alrighty. And speaking of DOL, it is time to go and take it. Do your best, and I will see you later in class. Thanks. Bye.